You ever hear words so sharp they cut deeper than a blade? That night, when the office was empty and the only light was the pale glow from my monitor, my manager passed behind me, glanced at the half-finished dashboard on my screen, and muttered with a crooked smile, "You're just a worker. Don't stay too late. Nobody will remember it." I laughed under my breath like it didn't matter, but I swear to you, those words lodged in me like glass. 12 hours later, the 50,000 bonus he thought was his was sitting in my account. But let me back up. I'm not writing this for pity. I'm not here to paint myself as some tragic hero. I'm here because what happened next is the kind of corporate karma you don't believe in until you see it yourself. And I want to walk you through it, moment by moment, exactly as it unfolded. By the end, maybe you'll understand why silence can be the loudest revenge. For years, I was the quiet guy in the corner, the one who fixed problems at 2 a.m., who picked up calls nobody else wanted, who sat in meetings taking notes while someone else got the credit. I didn't complain. I didn't fight for the spotlight. I thought my work would speak for itself. But in corporate life, your work doesn't speak. It gets stolen, repackaged, and presented by someone in a nicer suit. My manager was a master of that. He had the kind of confidence that fills a room, but it was hollow. He loved to coordinate, which meant showing up at the last 10 minutes of a crisis call, asking a pointless question, then sending a recap email where his name appeared in bold at the top. He knew how to look busy without ever touching the real work, and people bought it. They always do, until receipts appear. That Tuesday night, I wasn't supposed to be in the office. I should have gone home, ordered takeout, slept early. But we had a fragile integration scheduled with one of our biggest clients, a medical tech company that had threatened to walk if uptime didn't improve. The deployment window was narrow, the risks high. I volunteered to babysit it. Of course, volunteered really means I was the only one who didn't dodge it. So there I was at 11:47 p.m., fluorescent lights humming, code streaming across the logs, monitoring 3 dashboards at once. My dinner was a lukewarm sandwich from the vending machine. The building was so quiet, I could hear the elevator cables groan 2 floors down. I thought I was alone. That's when I heard his footsteps. My manager, expensive shoes clicking on the tile like a metronome of arrogance. He strolled past my desk, saw the half-empty coffee, the sweat on my forehead, the endless lines of system output scrolling, and he chuckled. "You really think this matters?" he said, hands in his pockets. "At the end of the day, you're just another worker. Don't fool yourself into thinking anyone notices. Go home. Leave the big stuff to leadership." And then he walked off, whistling. I sat frozen, the cursor blinking at me like it wanted an answer. Just a worker, just. Something shifted in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even hurt. It was clarity. A kind of cold, sharp awareness that every action leaves a trace. And I had been building traces all year. Tickets, approvals, logs, client feedback, timestamps, call recordings. While he was busy polishing slides, I was leaving behind a trail that showed exactly who kept this company alive at night. I wish I could say I confronted him then, slammed my fist on the desk, shouted back, but I didn't. I just turned back to my screen, checked the error queue, and pushed the fix through. The system stabilized. The integration survived. The client didn't walk, and I didn't go home until dawn. Here's the part you need to understand. In that company, there was one prize that mattered. A retention bonus, $50,000, awarded annually to the person whose work most directly secured client contracts. Everyone wanted it. Everyone pretended not to. And my manager, he was certain it was his. He didn't know that the moment he sneered at me, calling me just a worker, the decision had already been made. The receipts were in motion. The bonus was mine. Stay with me, because what followed wasn't just a paycheck. It was justice delivered in the most public, undeniable way possible. So if you're watching this, if you've ever been overlooked, mocked, treated like invisible hands behind someone else's spotlight, stick around. Because this is how a so-called just worker dismantled a manager with nothing but patience, proof, and the kind of karma that corporations can't spin away. And hey, if stories like this hit home for you, don't just scroll past. Drop a like, subscribe if you want more, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had a boss who thought you were just anything. Trust me, you're not. People always ask me later, why didn't you just quit? Why not leave a toxic place and find somewhere better? The truth is, I almost did. Twice. But each time, I hesitated for the same reason most of us do. Security. Bills. Rent. Family who relied on me. Quitting felt like setting fire to the only bridge I had. So I stayed. I endured. And in the process, I learned the rules of survival in corporate war zones. Let me paint you the picture. I wasn't some junior intern, but I wasn't an executive either. I lived in that gray zone, senior enough to solve real problems, invisible enough to be forgotten once the crisis ended. My official title was Operations Analyst 3, which sounds fancy until you realize it basically meant if something broke, I fixed it. If someone panicked, I calmed them down. If a client threatened to leave, I was the one at 3 a.m. patching the bleeding wound. That $50,000 bonus wasn't charity. It wasn't a lottery. It was written into policy as the Client Continuity Award. Every year, leadership tallied the evidence. Which person's work had the most direct impact on retaining a major contract? No politics, no favoritism, at least on paper. In reality, the process could be nudged, influenced, manipulated. Reports could be framed. Slides could shift the narrative. And my manager excelled at that game. See, he thrived on being visible. He had a sixth sense for when an executive walked by. His voice would rise, his laugh would echo, his body would pivot to include them in whatever he was leading. He had this signature move during all-hands meetings. He'd lean back, cross his arms, and toss in a rehearsed comment, just loud enough to remind everyone he was in control. But when deadlines closed in, when clients' servers buckled, when red alerts exploded across Slack at midnight, he was nowhere. He didn't log in, didn't touch the terminal, didn't even read the incident reports. He just waited. And once the smoke cleared, he'd show up for the storytelling. He believed leadership remembered stories, not facts. And too often, he was right. Let me give you one example. 3 months before that night, a critical deployment for a banking client went sideways. Authentication servers froze, customer logins failed, the client threatened escalation. I spent 9 straight hours running scripts, testing rollback procedures, and coordinating with engineers across time zones. By the time it was resolved, my eyes were bloodshot, my hands shaking. The next morning, there was a debrief meeting with executives. Guess who walked in late, carrying coffee, smiling like he'd just saved the world? My manager. He clicked through slides that I had prepared. He used words I'd written. He even cracked a joke about long nights that made everyone laugh. And then, this part still stings, he put his hand on my shoulder in front of everyone and said, "Of course, credit to the team for execution. Couldn't have done it without them." The team. Not my name, not my work, just the team. People clapped. Executives nodded. He got the handshake. I got a pat on the back. I went home that night and stared at my ceiling, wondering if this was it, if this was the invisible treadmill my career had become. I thought about quitting then. I even opened job boards. But something in me refused. If the game was stories, I'd build one. If the rules were receipts, I'd collect them. Not to spite him, not yet, but because I couldn't let myself vanish in the background forever. So I started keeping everything: screenshots, ticket IDs, Slack timestamps, emails where clients thanked me directly for saving the night. I built a folder, encrypted, timestamped, organized. It wasn't revenge at the time, it was survival. It was proof that I wasn't just another faceless cog. Now here's the irony. He thought I didn't care. He saw me as harmless, a workhorse, reliable but forgettable. He mocked me openly in small ways, rolling his eyes when I spoke, interrupting my updates, chuckling in hallways with other managers. "You need to be more strategic," he'd say. "Less in the weeds." Translation: stop doing the work that saves us and start pretending you're leading. But that wasn't me. I couldn't fake it. And maybe that's why he underestimated me so badly. Because what he didn't know was that the company's own policy was my shield. The Client Continuity Award wasn't based on opinions. It was based on evidence, and I had been quietly building a mountain of it. By the time the big medical tech integration loomed, my folder was fat with proof. Dozens of nights where my fixes had stopped a client from walking. Messages where executives from client companies said, "We trust my name to get this done." The irony? He had all the stories. I had all the receipts. And when that night came, when he sneered at me and called me just a worker, it wasn't just another insult. It was the last spark on a pile of dry wood I had been stacking for a year. The fire was ready. The night it all tipped over wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was just another integration, another long shift, another chance to be invisible. Or so I thought. The client was one of our biggest. Let's call them Meditech. They handled sensitive patient data, and their contract with us was massive. If uptime dipped below SLA even for a few hours, they had the right to walk. And they'd been threatening to. This integration was make or break. If we pulled it off, the client would stay another year. If we failed, the revenue hit could sink an entire department. That's why I volunteered to monitor it overnight. Nobody else wanted the job. Too risky. Too thankless. I remember sitting there at 10:58 p.m., a can of cheap energy drink in my hand, dashboards glowing like stained glass windows. The air smelled like burnt coffee and ozone from the servers. At 11:07, the alarms began. First, it was the database latency warning. Then cache misses spiked. Then authentication requests started queuing up like cars at a broken toll booth. In 5 minutes, the whole integration was choking. If Meditech's customers tried to log in, they'd hit walls of error messages. My pulse slammed. I opened 3 terminals at once, hands moving faster than my brain could narrate. Query the queue, flush the cache, roll back the last schema update. Nothing stuck. The errors multiplied. My Slack started buzzing with panicked messages. Is login down? Clients can't access records? Escalating to VP if not resolved in 15? And there I was, alone. I jumped into the war room call, a blank Zoom grid at first, just me, talking into the void, while command line windows scrolled like a slot machine. Finally, 2 engineers in Europe joined. Their mics crackled. One whispered, "We can't reach the cluster." The other said, "Should we hard reboot?" "No," I snapped. "That'll nuke the sessions. We'll lose everything." Instead, I improvised. I built a temporary feature flag to redirect new logins to a shadow cluster. I forced a rollback of the migration scripts. I manually requeued authentication tasks one by one, praying the system wouldn't collapse. Sweat pooled at the base of my neck. My shirt clung to my back. For 3 hours straight, I patched, tested, prayed. At one point, my terminal froze. My heart stopped until the line refreshed. Rollback complete. Slowly, dashboards bled from red back to yellow. Queues drained. Error rates fell. By 3:52 a.m., logins were flowing again. I slumped in my chair, half dead, but the client wasn't gone. Meditech was still with us. That should have been the end. But it was just the beginning. At 7:10 a.m., my manager strolled in. Fresh suit, hot latte, not a trace of exhaustion. He glanced at my pale face, the empty cans on my desk, the war room still open with "Incident resolved" stamped on it, and he grinned. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for the few early risers to hear. "Looks like the system held together. Great coordination, huh?" I stared at him, words choking in my throat. He didn't sit down. He pulled out his phone, turned toward the glass wall where sunlight was spilling in, and snapped a selfie. Him, smiling with the office behind him. He captioned it right there in front of me. Another crisis averted. Teamwork makes the dream work. Then he hit send to the executive group chat. Within minutes, hearts and thumbs up emojis floated in. Nice work. Knew you'd handle it. Great leadership as always. I sat there, trembling with exhaustion, watching him bask in the praise. He hadn't typed a single command. He hadn't joined the call. He hadn't even read the incident report. And yet, in their eyes, he was the savior. He looked back at me, still smiling, and said, "Don't worry, I mentioned the team. That includes you." That was the moment something inside me hardened. See, I'd been quiet before, patient, collecting my little folder of proof. But that night, I realized silence wasn't enough anymore. He wasn't just stealing credit. He was rewriting history while it was still happening. So while he bragged in hallways, while he strutted into meetings with his latte and his charm, I went to work on a different kind of project. I opened my folder. I pulled in every log from the integration, every Slack message, every timestamp from the war room. I clipped the client's thank you email, sent at 4:51 a.m. directly to me. "We appreciate your immediate action and support in saving our launch." Piece by piece, I built a wall of evidence so high it couldn't be ignored. And I didn't breathe a word of it, not yet, because I knew his ego would do the rest. If you've ever worked in a corporate battlefield, you know the loudest voice often wins, at least at first. But paper trails don't lie, and I had a paper trail that could bury him. After the Meditech incident, I moved like a ghost. On the surface, nothing changed. I showed up on time. I joined calls. I took notes. I nodded at his jokes. I let him bask in the spotlight, let him retell the story of how he coordinated the team and kept everyone calm under pressure. But beneath that calm surface, I was building something else. Every log from that night went into my encrypted folder. Every Slack message, every Zoom timestamp, every command line with my ID next to it. I clipped the screenshots of client thank yous, the ones that said, "Thanks, my name for saving the integration." I downloaded the incident report draft, my draft, before he edited it to slide his name to the top. I didn't just save files. I documented context. I wrote annotations, what triggered the error, what I did to fix it, who was on the call. I timestamped everything, cross-linked it with Jira tickets, even created a timeline spreadsheet. By the time I was done, I had a living autopsy of the entire incident, one that couldn't be refuted without rewriting the laws of physics. And it wasn't just that night. I went back through the year, digging up every major client save I'd handled. The banking crisis, the e-commerce holiday meltdown, the healthcare API outage. All of them were still in the systems, waiting to be surfaced. And in each one, the pattern was the same. My fingerprints on the fix. His fingerprints only on the recap emails. I knew that evidence mattered, but timing mattered more. Drop it too early and it looks like petty revenge. Drop it too late and it gets buried. I needed the perfect stage. The bonus cycle was coming. I knew he'd make his play soon, and when he did, I'd be ready. The first hint came a week later. I overheard him in the break room, laughing with another manager. "Honestly," he said, voice dripping with arrogance, "this year's continuity award is basically mine. I've carried the team through every client fire." The other manager laughed. 50 grand well deserved. I stood there, pouring stale coffee, pretending not to hear. Inside, I was ice, because the truth was simple. He hadn't carried a damn thing. He'd watched, he'd spun, he'd stolen, but carried, never. Still, I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I kept layering my wall of proof. And then something unexpected landed in my lap. One of the engineers from Europe, remember the guy who joined the Meditech war room, messaged me privately. "Hey," he wrote, "just so you know, I told my manager you were the one who fixed that mess, in case people try to rewrite it." I froze, staring at the message. It wasn't just me. Others had seen. Others were willing to speak. I added his message to my folder. A few days later, Meditech themselves sent formal feedback to our company. We want to specifically acknowledge my name for his immediate response and technical expertise during our recent integration issue. The email CC'd our VP. My hands shook as I saved it. It was like the universe itself was handing me bricks for my wall. Of course, my manager wasn't blind. He knew credit was slipping, so he doubled down. In meetings, he emphasized his leadership. In status updates, he wrote paragraphs about how he orchestrated the team response. He even started dropping lines like, "When I stayed up all night guiding the integration," when he stayed up all night, I wanted to laugh out loud. He had been home, asleep, while my fingers bled on the keyboard. But I stayed quiet, because silence was my weapon. The final piece came when I discovered something buried in the system, the compliance logs. See, every command run in production was tied to a unique ID, time-stamped and archived. And guess what? There wasn't a single entry with his ID during the Meditech incident. Not one. The logs showed my ID over and over, fixing, patching, saving. His? Zero. That was the nail in the coffin. I compiled everything into a single document, 40 pages long, logs, screenshots, client emails, Slack threads, compliance entries, witness notes. At the top, I wrote one sentence. This is the factual record of who saved Meditech. And then I closed the file, because I knew the moment was coming. He would make his big move soon, parading his version of the story in front of executives. And when he did, I'd open my file. Not a second before. The meeting was supposed to be routine. Just another post-mortem, another chance for my manager to flex his polished slides and remind everyone how indispensable he was. But I knew better. The invite came from the VP of Operations. Incident review, Meditech integration. Attendees, executives from engineering, product, finance, sales leadership, my manager, me. The stage was set. That morning, I sat at my desk, staring at my folder, the 40-page arsenal I'd built. I didn't even feel nervous. Not exactly. It was more like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing you'd finally jump. By the time we gathered in the glass-walled conference room, he was already in performance mode. Fresh haircut, tailored blazer, his trademark smirk. He loaded up his slides. Bold colors, big arrows, dramatic words like leadership, coordination, execution. He opened with a practiced chuckle. As you all know, we face significant risk with the Meditech integration, but thanks to decisive leadership and cross-functional teamwork, we turned what could have been a disaster into a success story. The VP nodded. The sales director scribbled notes. Slide 2, a timeline, except it wasn't the real timeline. His version showed manager coordination call at 11:30 p.m., team execution overnight, and leadership update at dawn. His name appeared at every milestone. My name, nowhere. He was rewriting history in real time, right there in front of the people who decided bonuses, and they were buying it. For 15 minutes, he talked about my approach, my orchestration, my oversight. The word "my" echoed like nails in my skull. Executives nodded, murmured approval. I could almost see the $50,000 drifting toward his pocket. Then came the moment. The VP leaned forward. "Let's open the post-mortem log. I want to compare with what's in the incident system." His smile flickered, just a fraction, but I caught it. "Of course," he said smoothly, gesturing at me. "Why don't we have my name pull it up? He was on the team that night." That was my cue. I connected my laptop to the projector. The room dimmed, the screen filled with text. Real logs, real timestamps, real evidence. "Here's the official system record," I said, my voice steady. "Every command executed during the incident is tied to a unique ID." I scrolled slowly, line after line, my ID, restarting services, rolling back schema, flushing queues, rebuilding cache, dozens of entries, hundreds. Then I searched his ID. The results box blinked once, then returned empty. No entries. Not one. The room went silent. I let the silence stretch. Executives shifted in their chairs. Someone coughed. Finally, I spoke again. The client also sent this the next morning. I pulled up the Meditech email, projected in crisp white text. We want to specifically acknowledge my name for his immediate response and technical expertise in saving our integration. The sales director raised his eyebrows. The finance lead whispered something under his breath. My manager laughed nervously. Well, obviously, the whole team played a role. But I wasn't done. Here's the war room call log. I clicked. A list of attendees appeared. My name. 2 engineers from Europe. No entry for him. Here are the Slack messages. I continued, scrolling through timestamps. Client panic. My updates. Engineers confirming fixes. No messages from him. Here's the draft incident report. I showed my version saved at 4:30 a.m. and his edited version 2 hours later. Same content, reordered, his name at the top. The VP's jaw tightened, and then came the final blow. I played a clip from the recorded Zoom call. Our war room platform automatically archived them. At 3:10 a.m., while I was sweating through a manual rollback, you could hear my voice explaining the steps. Then silence, except for keyboard clatter. Then me again, confirming fixes. No manager voice, no manager presence. I paused the clip. The room was dead quiet. Then I turned back to the executives. This is the factual record of who saved Meditech. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just let the evidence sit there. Undeniable. The VP looked directly at my manager. Do you have anything to add? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I was coordinating behind the scenes. With no system logins, no call presence, no client emails, no Slack messages? The VP asked, voice flat. He stammered, I guided the approach? But it was over. Everyone in that room saw it. The Emperor had no clothes. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Vindication. When the silence broke, it wasn't with applause or shouting. It was worse. It was with the kind of cold, clinical questions that make executives shift from friendly nodding to surgical dissection. The VP of Operations cleared his throat. Let's confirm something. Finance, remind me of the criteria for the Continuity Award. The finance director, who'd been quiet until now, flipped open a binder. Client Continuity Award, $50,000 bonus. Awarded annually to the individual whose contributions most directly secured a client contract renewal. Evidence must be measurable. System logs, client feedback, compliance records. Every word was a nail. And in this case, the VP said slowly, eyes still on my manager, the evidence points to one individual, and it isn't you. The air in the room shifted. My manager, usually so composed, so smug, looked pale. His smile was frozen, his jaw tight. He tried to recover with a chuckle. Look, maybe I didn't run the commands, but leadership isn't about typing. It's about guiding the team, ensuring outcomes. I was coordinating at a higher level. The VP didn't blink. Then why do the logs show edits to the incident report? Edits that repositioned credit? Why does the client email think only my name? Why do the war room recordings have no record of your voice? A flush crept up his neck. He shifted in his chair, tugged at his sleeve, tried to spin again. I kept the executives calm that night. You know how critical that is. It was grasping at straws. Everyone knew it. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife, one of the engineers from Europe, the same one who DM'd me, spoke up from the back of the room. With respect, he said in a calm accent, we were on the call. My name was leading. He saved it. We didn't hear or see any contribution from management. The VP nodded once, sharply. Noted. The sales director leaned forward. If Meditech had walked, we would have lost 8 figures in revenue. They stayed because of him. He pointed directly at me. That's the definition of continuity. Every eye turned back to me. My hands stayed flat on the table, my face neutral. Inside, my heart was hammering. But I refused to gloat. This wasn't about theatrics. This was about truth. And then came the coup de grace. The compliance officer, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. We reviewed the SOC2 audit logs. They confirm what was just presented. Every action that night is tied to my name's ID. There are no entries for the manager in question. Additionally, tampering with post-incident reports to misrepresent contributions is a direct violation of our compliance policy. The room froze. My manager's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His entire career had been built on polishing narratives, on being untouchable. And now, the very systems he ignored had sealed his fate. The VP sat back in his chair, expression unreadable. Effective immediately, my name will report directly to me until this is resolved. You, he turned to my manager, are relieved of your supervisory duties pending review. The color drained from his face. He tried to speak again, but the words came out like static. You can't... The VP cut him off with a raised hand. This isn't a debate. We deal in facts here, and the facts are not in your favor. For the first time, my manager had no story to tell. The meeting ended with a shuffle of papers, chairs scraping back, murmurs of, "Thank you." Executives shook my hand. Some even patted my shoulder, but I barely registered it. My focus was locked on him, the man who had mocked me as just a worker. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at the table. The smirk gone, the facade cracked. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was a room full of people finally seeing the truth. It was the hollow echo of his silence where his swagger used to be. For months he had stolen my work, my credit, my dignity. Now, in the span of 40 minutes, it had all flipped. And this was only the beginning, because the investigation wasn't over. Investigations in corporate life don't move fast, except when the money is on the line. And in this case, $50,000 and a multi-million-dollar client contract were dangling in the balance. Within 48 hours, HR called me in. Not for discipline, not for a warning, but for an interview. They wanted details, timestamps, Slack logs, copies of the incident report. I handed everything over calmly, folder by folder, link by link. Every artifact matched the compliance logs. Every client message reinforced the same truth. It wasn't me on trial. It was him. Meanwhile, whispers spread across the office. People noticed he no longer joined leadership stand-ups. He wasn't CC'd on executive emails. His once booming laugh in the break room had gone quiet. For the first time, he looked small. 2 weeks later, the announcement came. The VP wrote in an all-hands email, "We are pleased to confirm this year's Client Continuity Award is granted to my name for his direct and measurable impact on client retention during the Meditech integration. His actions prevented contract termination and ensured continued partnership. $50,000. In black and white. Mine." I sat at my desk, the glow of the email still fresh. While the office around me buzzed, people came by to shake my hand. Some genuinely, others just curious to see the quiet worker who had suddenly become the headline. And him? He was nowhere. His office door was shut, blinds drawn. By the end of the week, the company announced a leadership transition. No fanfare, no thank you email, just gone. But the story didn't end there. Because with that bonus came leverage. The VP called me in privately. "You've proven yourself, not just technically, but with resilience. We want to make sure you're supported going forward." He slid an envelope across the table. A counteroffer package. Salary increase, direct reporting line, freedom from the manager who had belittled me. The irony? I also had a competing offer from one of our rivals, thanks to recruiters who'd seen the client praise floating around. They knew my name now. My skills weren't invisible anymore. For the first time in years, I had choice. And I didn't rush it. I weighed the offers, the money, the respect, the future. Revenge wasn't about humiliating him anymore. That part had already happened. Revenge was about never being in that position again. never being at the mercy of someone else's spin. So I set conditions. If I stayed, I wanted guarantees. Clear authorship on deliverables, direct credit in client communications, protection from credit theft. Not just for me, but as policy for the whole OPES team. The VP agreed. That was the true victory. Not just the 50,000. Not just watching him slink away with his career in ashes, but changing the system so no one else would be mocked as just a worker, while their labor built someone else's glory. And still, part of me wondered, did he understand what happened? Did he grasp that he lost, not because I fought dirty, but because I fought clean, with facts, with patience, with the very systems he ignored? I'll never know. I never saw him again. Rumor had it he tried consulting for a while, then faded out of the industry. But me? I walked out of that office lighter, freer, richer, not just in money, but in dignity, because for once the quiet worker wasn't invisible. He was undeniable. The strangest part of revenge is how quiet it feels when it's done. You imagine fireworks, some cinematic crescendo, a triumphant song playing as you walk away. But in reality, it's silence. After the dust settled, after the emails and the handshakes and the congratulations, the office went back to its rhythm. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, people argued over coffee orders, and I sat at my desk with a deposit notification glowing on my phone. $50,000 richer, but more importantly, free. Free from the shadow of someone else's arrogance. Free from the weight of being mocked as just a worker. I didn't gloat. I didn't print the email and tape it to his old office door. I didn't need to. The truth was already out there, carved into system logs and compliance reports, and the silence of an empty manager's chair. Instead, I focused on building forward. I set up processes that made credit transparent, incident reports with locked authorship, client communications with direct attributions, team retros where every voice was heard. I wanted the next quiet worker to be visible without needing a 40-page folder to prove their worth. Outside the office, life shifted too. I paid down debt. I took my family on a trip we'd been putting off for years. I bought myself something small but symbolic, a leather-bound notebook, the opposite of a digital log. In it, I wrote one line on the first page. Never let anyone convince you that quiet work is invisible. Sometimes late at night, I think about him, the man who sneered at me, who built his empire on stories and lies. Did he sit in some other office now, trying the same tricks on new people? Or had he finally learned that the receipts always win? Maybe it doesn't matter. His story was noise. Mine became proof. And if you're still here, listening to me spill this whole thing, maybe that's the real lesson. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to fight dirty to win. You need patience, discipline, and the courage to let the facts speak louder than anyone's arrogance. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't just a worker. I was the worker who stayed, the one who fixed it, the one who proved once and for all that the quietest person in the room can bring the loudest downfall. So if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, written off, remember this. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest weapon you have. And if stories like this resonate with you, if you've ever dreamed of seeing karma play out in real time, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share your story in the comments. Because I read them all, and I promise, you're not invisible. Not anymore.